When my parents gathered us in the living room that night, I already sensed something was off. They were smiling too widely, the kind of smile they only wore when trying to hide something. My brother sat on the couch, relaxed and confident, already assuming whatever announcement was coming had something to do with him. He was usually right. My mother held a brown envelope with both hands. My father cleared his throat, acting formal, like he was about to read a will. Then he said it, Grandpa's apartment, the one he'd spent 40 years paying off, the one he'd always said would be split between us, was being handed over to my brother entirely. Not shared, not discussed, not even explained, just given away. My brother grinned like he'd won a lottery he never worked for. My mother handed him the deed, and he accepted it without even pretending to be hesitant. I watched the exchange in silence, trying to understand how they made such a big decision, while pretending I didn't exist. My father claimed it was because he's the stable one, he's the future of the family, and he'll take good care of it. The excuses came fast, rehearsed, and painfully predictable. Nothing was said about me, not a word. They didn't even try to soften the blow. I went to my room afterward, but the bitterness didn't come from the apartment itself. It came from the message behind their choice. They'd finally made it clear who mattered and who didn't. To them, my efforts, my work, my sacrifices, none of it measured up to the golden child they believed my brother was. But what they didn't know was simple. Grandpa had already told me years ago that the apartment wasn't theirs to give away. He had made arrangements they clearly didn't know about. And those arrangements were about to turn everything upside down. The days that followed felt strangely quiet. My parents acted like nothing had happened, walking around the house with a lightness that suggested they believed this so-called gift had settled the future of our family. My brother strutted around like a landlord, openly talking about renovations, repainting, maybe even renting the place out for extra income. Every word revealed how little he cared about the emotional value of what he'd been handed. Grandpa's life's work had become his vanity project, but beneath their confidence was a flaw none of them noticed. They assumed Grandpa's apartment legally belonged to them after his passing. They assumed the deed they dug out from his old desk was the final authority. They assumed too much. Grandpa had been old-fashioned in many ways, but he wasn't naive. He'd watched the family dynamics slowly twist over the years. He saw how my brother played the role of the responsible son only when it benefited him. He saw how my parents made excuses for everything he did while criticizing everything I did. He even warned me once, in a quiet conversation on his balcony, that jealousy and favoritism can rot a family from inside out. At the time, I didn't realize he was preparing me. What my parents never discovered was that Grandpa had updated his will 2 years after that conversation. He moved the apartment under a living trust, one that bypassed everyone except me. That trust document, notarized and airtight, had been sitting in a safe place since the day he signed it, and I held the key to that safe place. Still, I didn't rush. I let my family continue celebrating their imaginary victory. My mother started telling relatives proudly that my brother would now carry the family name. My father followed him to the apartment several times, helping plan modifications. Every decision they made was built on the assumption that their authority was final. Meanwhile, I started quietly gathering every document related to the trust. I visited Grandpa's lawyer, who still remembered me and confirmed everything. He gave me certified copies and even smiled, saying he had expected this moment. He had seen the imbalance in our family too. Once the paperwork was secured, I visited the apartment myself, not with entitlement, but with respect. I walked through the rooms slowly, touching the old wooden panels Grandpa polished every month. I stepped onto the balcony where he drank tea at sunrise. The place still smelled faintly like him. It reminded me why he fought so hard to keep it. Not for wealth, not for prestige, but for legacy. A legacy he clearly wanted me to protect. But the turning point came when my brother, confident in his imaginary ownership, decided to begin renovations. He hired workers, ordered paint samples, and even removed some of the old belongings Grandpa left behind, things I knew held emotional value. When he tossed one of Grandpa's wooden hand-carved boxes into a pile of trash, something in me settled. Not in anger, but in clarity. It was time. The next morning, I requested a meeting with everyone at the apartment. My parents arrived irritated, assuming I'd come to apologize or offer help. My brother looked annoyed, acting like he was doing me a favor by showing up at all. I didn't raise my voice, didn't insult anyone. I simply unzipped the folder I had brought and placed the trust documents on the dining table, the same table my brother had wiped clean for his renovation plans. At first, they looked confused. Then their eyes scanned the names, the signatures, the legal stamps. Silence spread through the room like a shadow. My mother was the first to speak, her voice barely audible. "What is this?" I told them everything. How Grandpa set up the trust. How the apartment legally passed to me when he died. How the deed they found was outdated and void. How every renovation they planned, every decision they made, every assumption they held meant nothing in the eyes of the law. My father's face turned pale. My brother's confidence cracked instantly, leaving something closer to panic. He demanded explanations, tried to argue, tried to claim Grandpa would never do this. But deep down, he knew exactly why Grandpa made that choice. He just couldn't accept it. I didn't fight. I didn't argue. I simply handed them the official notice from the lawyer instructing them to vacate the property within a legally set timeline and immediately stop any alterations. The moment the reality sank in, the room shifted. The arrogance evaporated. My brother's plans collapsed. My parents' certainty shattered. And for the first time in years, I wasn't the afterthought. I wasn't the expendable child. I was the one carrying Grandpa's legacy because he had trusted me long before they ever did. But the story wasn't finished yet. The emotional truth still had to unfold. The week after the announcement felt surreal. My parents walked around the house acting like nothing had happened, but the tension in the air was impossible to miss. My brother carried himself like the crowned heir of the family, already talking about how he would repaint Grandpa's apartment, rent it out, maybe even knock down a wall to make it more modern. Every sentence made it clear he thought the place was his reward for simply existing. What they didn't know was that Grandpa had been far more aware of our family dynamic than they ever realized. He saw the favoritism, the excuses made for my brother, the pressure placed on me. He knew exactly how things would unravel after his passing, and he prepared for it quietly. While my parents celebrated their decision, I started searching through the things Grandpa had left me. That's when I found the letter, the one he'd written 2 years before he died. In it, he explained that he had updated the ownership of the apartment, placing it under a living trust with my name as the sole beneficiary. He said he trusted me to protect it, not exploit it. The letter was simple, but the meaning was heavy. My parents had no idea this document existed. They thought the old deed they found was all that mattered. They never imagined Grandpa would choose differently from their expectations. Holding that letter, I realized the time was coming when everything they believed would be turned upside down.